we're going to talk about some of the best systems that large tech companies use to help them accomplish their audacious goals and how we can bring those into our personal life. Maybe you've always wanted to train for a marathon. Maybe you've wanted to start a small business that was going to help you be the next millionaire. Imagine we treated our life goals like road mapping. How much more would we accomplish, and hence how much happier would we feel that we're making progress in our life? I thought I'd share my own system that I've been using for years, borrowing a lot of the principles for how large tech companies set and accomplish their goals. Hey guys, I'm Diana and I'm a senior product manager at a large tech company based in Silicon Valley, California. So what we're going to cover today are three things. First, we're going to go over the 6 P's framework, which is a framework that I've developed and have been using for years to help me accomplish my goals. Number 2, we're going to talk about how to set measurable goals. So we're turning what you want into things that you can actually, number 3, track progress on and reflect. So let's dive in. So first, you're probably wondering, what the heck is 6 P's? The first P stands for professional. What career goals do you have for 2022? Is it maybe to transition to a different role? Maybe it's to get a promotion, or maybe you want to start a business this year. Well, people say work isn't everything, especially you Europeans. But think about it, about 8 hours of a day, that's around 50% of our waking hours, are spent working. So we might as well be doing something that makes us happy and helps us grow. The second P is passion. These are the things that you would invest significant time in if money wasn't an issue. For example, maybe you want to get really good at sports. Maybe you're really passionate about cooking and that's what you default to on your free time. I know that's definitely the case for me. Or maybe you wanted to start a YouTube channel to share knowledge. And that's what I realized in 2020, that I was really passionate about sharing my knowledge to help people advance their careers. Third one is productivity. How do you do things more efficiently? You might delegate, you might say no more, you might document processes to make sure you're taking less time. Basically, your system for getting things done is probably one of the most important things underlying how you get things done. There's tons of productivity apps out there because everyone is obsessed with becoming more productive. Why? Well, most people tend to procrastinate. We tend to have bad habits that get in the way of us getting things done. Like myself, I have a really bad habit of perfectionism. And I'm not saying this as a humble brag, but it is so annoying how much time I have to read over some of these scripts in order to get it right that it ends up taking me hours when it can take someone 15 minutes. The fourth one is personal well-being. What are your health goals? So I'm talking about your physical and your mental health. So many of us put this to the wayside. I have friends who have some of the best insurance in the country, but they still have not gone for a checkup at the doctor's for 3 years. Do not neglect your health, whether it's physical or mental health. Because when we don't have good systems in place, nothing else works. For example, I've been burned out by work before, and because it took a mental toll on my life, I was unable to accomplish any of the other goals that I had set out to do. So if you don't have this foundational layer of health, forget about progressing any of the other goals on your list. Besides just health, I also have under personal well-being, development of character. What goals do you have to develop your character? I feel like back then, during Benjamin Franklin's time, people were much more obsessed with developing good character. So the concept of a good person versus a not good person. So characteristics such as honesty, diligence, fairness, justice. What happened to the good old times? Anyways, versus media today portrays another set of values around money and fame. So what goals would you set for yourself around being a person that you would want your kids to model after? The next P is people. What goals do you have around improving or investing in the relationships around you? Multiple studies have been done to assess what is the biggest individual contributor to happiness, and it always comes down to the relationships around you. So here you might think, what community do you want to join? What people do you want to be surrounded by? What relationships do you want to invest in 2022? Maybe some of you watching have started a family. How do you want your family dynamics to be? And the last P is for profit. What are your monetary goals for this year? This doesn't necessarily mean you have to earn more money this year, but maybe what are you trying to save up for this year? Or how do you plan to be more intentional with your money so you're spending it on things that actually make you happy? Many of us were taught that money equals happiness.
Money's good. Money is happiness.
But not if you're spending it on the wrong things. Many times, even with the same income, you can increase your happiness by directing what you spend money on the things that are actually going to make you happy. So for example, previous years I've spent tons of money on traveling, and I realized traveling wasn't making me very happy anymore. And hence this year I set a goal for myself to decrease the money that I'm investing to travel. So those are the 6 P's. It's nothing fancy, but it's an easy way for me to remember if I want to develop a holistic view on what might help me be happy in my life. Those are the things that I might consider setting goals for. You might have other things that are not on the list that you could add, but make sure it starts with a P. I'm curious, what are your goals for 2022 based on any of the 6 P's that we talked about? Share it in the comments below because I'm curious how we can help you turn it into measurable goals. Now we get into our second section, which is now you have some idea of topics of where you should be setting goals. How do we turn them into actual goals that we can track progress on? And when you think about it, when we build products or we're working inside a company, how will you know you've actually succeeded or are making progress towards something unless you have something to measure it by? So here, let's talk about a couple concepts that we use in large tech companies to help us accomplish our company's goals, but bringing them into your personal goals. So the first one is the concept of OKRs, objectives and key results. Some of you might have heard about this concept, and it was largely popularized by Google, which is what they use to help each of their employees accomplish their goals, to then sum up to look at what they've accomplished. Need I say more? So I like to think of OKRs, or objectives and key results, as a combination of qualitative and quantitative goals. And you would start with the objective, which is qualitative in nature. So for example, let's take one of the 6 P's with people. Let's say the qualitative goal I have for the next 6 months is spending more time with family. Well, that's quite a vague goal, because how do I know whether I've succeeded in that goal or not? And hence, we need to first come up with a metric on what's going to reflect that goal. So in this case, a good metric that might represent that is the number of hours spent with family in a day or in a week, because that's something easy that I can count. Like today, did I spend 2 hours or 3 hours? So you see what we did there? The objective was spending more time with your family. So the key result is how we know whether we've accomplished our objective. So our second concept might help us get to define what metrics should we choose. So there's the concept of leading versus lagging metrics. So leading metric is more like an input metric versus a lagging metric is more like an output metric. So if we're thinking about an equation, the leading metric would be one of the variables and the lagging metric would be the output, or the thing that comes after the equal sign. And if you think about that like in a formula, in this case with our life, sometimes we're not sure of all the variables in the formula, and hence we can control maybe the leading metrics, and the lagging metric hence sometimes can feel like it's a bit out of our control, either because there's more variables we're not aware of, either because there's a variable that might stand for R, which represents randomness, and hence it's important to focus on the leading metric because that's what's within our control. So if any of you guys know the concept of Stoicism, which I would recommend, it's ancient Greek philosophy, a key principle under Stoicism is focus on what's in your control and you'll be happier. So here, when coming up with goal metrics, focus on the leading metrics that you can actually contribute to. These are the metrics that you want to hold yourself especially accountable for. So for example, myself, as a YouTube creator, my leading metric could be the number of videos that I'm producing in a week. A lagging metric would just be the number of subscribers. So you can see the number of subscribers isn't totally in my control. It's up to the control of, let's say, the YouTube algorithm, how people like the content or don't like the content. And hence, I'm going to focus on my leading metric to make sure I'm pumping out and doing my best. Of course, I care about the lagging metric, the number of subscribers, which is one of the things that I want to see grow. But because it's not in my control, I'm going to focus on what is in my control, hoping that it's correlated to growing the number of subscribers. So hence here, it's not to ignore your lagging metric. It's important to figure out what are leading metrics or levers that will contribute to the lagging metric. Okay, just think, what is my objective? What are some key metric results that I would want to see? And which of them are in my control and which of them are not in my control? And how I can focus on the ones that are in my control and whether those are correlated to the metrics that are not in my control but I still care about. So when you track progress, your day-to-day or week-to-week should be focused on forwarding your leading metric with the hope that the lagging metric that you care about will trend in the right direction because it's correlated. So next, you might ask, now I have some metrics in mind, what targets should I actually set? So it's really hard to set maybe one number, and hence a good practice here is what we like to call in companies setting P50 and P90 goals, which means you set a range instead of one specific number. And the P90 goal is one where there's a probability or your confidence level is 90% that you'll hit it. And the P50 goal is you hitting that goal with 50% probability. So that gives you a reach goal and a goal that's a safe goal. And here, you can be more scientific about it and maybe benchmark what are you currently accomplishing today and then increase it to some certain amount. Or you can be artistic about it and choose something that feels like you've accomplished something. So for example, for how many videos I might want to create every week for YouTube, 1 feels a bit insignificant, 6 feels like way too much that I'd be burned out. So something around 3 videos a week feels appropriate. And the fourth principle around setting measurable goals is to ensure you prioritize. Not every goal is going to matter the same, so don't treat it the same. So prioritizing early is going to help you make the call and make the decision when you have to make trade-offs, because we're limited on time and resources. There's a story that Warren Buffett was working with one of his drivers, and his drivers wanted advice from him to ask him how he can accomplish goals and maybe be a billionaire. And Warren Buffett asked him, okay, what are the goals that you have? And the guy came back with a list of 20. And then Warren asked, what are the 5 most important goals? The guy struggled to prioritize, but ultimately he came up with 5. And then Buffett told him, okay, the rest of the 15 are your not to do goals because they're going to distract you. So here with prioritizing, you want to ruthlessly prioritize. And what system you can use here is to think about P1s, P2s, and P3s, which stands for priority 1, priority 2, priority 3, so that it's clear to you which are the most important. And when you think about priority 3 things, those are things that if you don't get done, you're not going to be too fussed about it. Priority 2 things only get done if priority 1 is accomplished. If not, priority 2 things are not to be done. So this gives you a ranking of how to prioritize when you have a certain set of time. The first time you probably do this exercise around prioritization, you'll probably have way too many P1s. For example, more than 3 P1s is way too many. And hence, you'll have to think here, how do I prioritize ruthlessly? If your prioritization doesn't make you feel uncomfortable and make you feel like you're actually sacrificing something significant, you're not prioritizing ruthlessly enough. One last tip I want to give here when setting goals, do not overwhelm the number of goals you have. Because if you have way too many goals, it's going to be hard to track progress. It might overwhelm you where you end up giving up all your goals. So here, my practice would be for every P that we talked about in the 6 Ps, think about maybe 1 to 2 objectives. And then for each of those, you'll want to think about one metric to help you define success for that objective. And like we mentioned, there probably shouldn't be more than 3 to 5 P1s. So something like 10 objectives would be more manageable. Our third topic that we're going to talk about is tracking goals and reflecting. So my first suggestion is when you come up with the goals that we talked about, review it weekly or bi-weekly. Why? Because a week gives you sufficient time to make some progress. You could track your goals every single day, but then it could end up being overwhelming, and in a day, sometimes you're not able to make the progress that you set out to be. And within each every day, you might not be able to make that progress that then might lead you to frustration and thinking that you haven't accomplished your goals. It's just necessary to give yourself a bit more time to accomplish your goals because you want to give yourself a buffer. Why? Because life happens. Again, we talked about the whole formula of whatever your output is. There's going to be some randomness that happens that is not in your control, and we want to account for that. So say one of my personal well-being goals is to exercise more. And that was actually one of my goals that I set in 2020. So here, my objective is exercise more, but my key result, instead of saying I want to exercise once every single day, you might consider I want to exercise 5 days a week because you want to give yourself some buffer. And think about it, exercising 5 days a week versus 7 days is still a major accomplishment for someone who doesn't exercise often. So every week or every other week, review your goals and make it a fun activity. Go do it at a coffee shop. Go do it with friends so that you're looking forward to this even if you haven't made progress on some of the goals. The second concept under tracking your goals is to track your progress. And an easy way to do it is traffic lighting color coding. So for the goals that I set out, I would color code it green, yellow, or red based on my progress. So green states that I'm either trending well or I already accomplished it. Yellow means there's a 50 chance that I could accomplish it and a 50 chance that I might not. And red means high risk of failure. Pay attention. The more objective your goals are, the easier it is going to be to track this progress. For example, if my goal was to produce 2 videos a week on YouTube, it's pretty binary. Either I created 1 or I created 2 or I created none. So if I hit the 2, I accomplished my goal. If I didn't hit the 2, I didn't accomplish my goal. Versus if you had a goal that's more subjective, like create 1 high quality video. If I haven't defined high quality video, it's going to be hard to use the traffic light color coding to know whether it's a yellow or green. Also, when you're picking metrics to represent your key result, make sure you're picking metrics that you're able to track every week, every bi-weekly. You don't want something you can track once a month because it's going to take too long before you know whether you've made progress